Funding for the Nashvillager podcast comes from the Hal Allen Clinic, specializing in minimally invasive robotic spine surgery and laser brain tumor surgery. For 40 years, the neurosurgeons of the Hal Allen Clinic have been national leaders in brain and spine surgery.
This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager podcast. It's December 29th, 2025. On this day in 1848, the White House was illuminated by gas lamps for the very first time. Tennessean James K. Polk was the president then, but the gasification of the executive mansion was not his project. It was part of a plan authorized by Congress about 6 years prior. The very first gas lights in D.C. were installed in the House and Senate chambers of the Capitol building. Then lines were extended down Pennsylvania Avenue, with street lights lining that very important roadway. And it was only after all of that was in place that gas made it to the White House. Now, the First Lady, Murfreesboro native Sarah Childress Polk, was not a fan. She thought gaslight was too harsh compared to the candles that had long been the norm. Most everything in the staterooms where the Polks hosted events was converted to gas, but Sarah drew the line at the chandelier in the Blue Room. And at the first event, after the gas was installed, she was kind of proven right. But for a reason that had nothing to do with the quality of the light. Around 9 p.m., there was a problem with the gas supply lines. All of the lights on the state floor went dark, leaving the party pitch black. Everywhere except the Blue Room. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. It's a little ironic that Sarah Polk had such an I told you so moment at a party, or that her decision helped the party go on, because Mrs. Polk was about as big of a party pooper as the White House ever saw. When she was First Lady, there was no hard liquor allowed, no dancing, no card games. She disapproved of the theater, horse racing, concerts. She actually managed to ban concerts all over Washington, D.C. for a while. And on Polk's inauguration night, when the first couple entered the ballroom, the music stopped entirely. That was a big change from previous administrations. So, of course, people had to ask why White House parties had become so simple, so boring. Her response was, quote, "To dance in these rooms would be undignified, and it would be respectful neither to the house nor to the office for dancing to be going on in one apartment while in another we were conversing with dignitaries." And she did mean we. President Polk seemed to barely communicate with his cabinet, but Sarah was right at the center of everything. She was just as much a politician as her husband, maybe more so. She acted as his personal assistant and his most trusted advisor. She read all the paperwork sent to his office before he did. In fact, she was the one who decided what he needed to read and what wasn't worth the president's time and attention. None of which is to say that Sarah Polk was thoroughly austere. Her take on Presbyterian faith didn't allow for a lot of the fun that was popular in that era, but she was still a very wealthy woman who found ways to enjoy spending that money. Her clothes were incredibly fashionable and quite expensive. She liked to make an entrance. She had a reputation for showing up to church a little bit late and then swooping in with all eyes on her and, of course, on whatever fabulous ensemble she was wearing that day. Interestingly, she seemed to have a real friendship with the former First Lady, who was kind of known for making any party sparkle. Dolly Madison was nearing the end of her life during the Polk administration, but she was still the social center of D.C. She was the grande dame of the city. She was fun. I kind of have to wonder if maybe she was at that party when all the gas lights went out. If so, the chance to hang out with Madison may have been what kept everyone hanging around at such a dry event. Well, although she wasn't a big fan of the gaslights, Polk did make her mark on the White House. She was the first to decorate what is now called the Red Room in, well, red. She may not have approved of band concerts, but she did have the Marine Corps band play at events, and she's the one who instituted the custom of having them announce the president's arrival with "Hail to the Chief." The Polks were the first presidential family to host a Thanksgiving dinner at the White House. She also brought slavery back into the executive residence. On her order, the servants hired by the previous administration were fired and replaced by enslaved people who lived in basement quarters. It was billed as a cost-saving measure. And I say she did it because President Polk made it very clear anything that could possibly be called domestic was completely up to Sarah. But that choice was right in line with his own. James Polk used his presidential salary to quietly buy 19 people during his time in office. Many of them were children. He arranged for most of them to be sent to work on the plantation he owned in Mississippi. But he also made it clear to the agent who handled those transactions that he did not want the public to know about them. You see, while the Polks made no secret of being pro-slavery, there was a growing abolitionist movement at the time, and as a pair of politicians, they both spent their days trying to figure out how to keep the peace in a nation increasingly divided over the question of where slavery should be allowed, especially as they added more territories and states to the Union. This was a big year for transit in Nashville. In just a few minutes, we'll take a look back at what happened. That's coming up after the newscast.
Funding for the Nashvillager podcast comes from the Hal Allen Clinic, specializing in minimally invasive robotic spine surgery and laser brain tumor surgery. For 40 years, the neurosurgeons of the Hal Allen Clinic have been national leaders in brain and spine surgery.
Best journalism in the nation. That's an apt description for a lot of what you hear on WPLN News. The proof this spring is in the array of journalism awards coming in. The Supermajority podcast won 3 national contests. Our investigative reporting, partnered with ProPublica, was named some of the best education coverage in the country. And for arts and culture, This Is Nashville and our music journalism are being honored on the national stage. We're proud, and you can be too.
Here's the latest from WPLN News.
A federal judge in Nashville has canceled the criminal trial of Kilmar Abrego Garcia and will instead hold an evidentiary hearing on whether the government has selectively and vindictively prosecuted him. In the spring, the Trump administration deported Abrego Garcia, who has no criminal record, to El Salvador. He returned to the U.S. in June when he was brought up on federal human smuggling charges related to a traffic stop in Tennessee. The Trump administration have also accused Abrego Garcia of being a gang member, which he's denied. At the evidentiary hearing, the judge said prosecutors must justify the charges against Abrego Garcia, otherwise they could be dismissed. That hearing is scheduled for January 28th. A Tennessee legal dispute that has reached the appeals courts could change how shaken baby syndrome is considered in trials. The case dates to a first-degree murder conviction in 2000 after a man's infant son died. The science used to assess shaken baby syndrome has since evolved. Russell Mays was sentenced to life in prison for the death of his son, Alex. The medical examiner at the time determined Alex's cause of death was trauma from being shaken. But the Tennessean reports he has since told courts that given the same information today, he would not reach the same conclusion. Mays' attorneys argue over the past 2.5 decades, medical research has shown birth-related injuries, problems with blood clotting, and metabolic disorders could all cause the same symptoms that were once considered telltale signs of abuse. An organization that tracks overturned convictions has reported 40 known exonerations tied to shaken baby syndrome since 1989. New Jersey overturned a conviction this year, and Texas did last November. Leaders of Nashville's airport are closing in on a formal deal with the Boring Company for a tunnel to bring travelers to and from the airport via private Tesla rides. The Tennessean obtained records that show the airport authority wants Boring to pay just shy of $400,000 per year for access to a portion of airport property. The deal could run for 2 decades and net the airport between $7 and $10 million. The newspaper notes the payment is far lower, reduced by 3/4 from what was initially discussed in the summer. Leaders wouldn't discuss that change, and no precise area of the property has been disclosed for tunnel access. The deal could go to a vote by the airport authority in January or February, and the broader project has yet to apply for some state permits. An audit has found wide-ranging issues in state-operated nursing homes for military veterans. Financially, the board that oversees the veterans' homes reported losses each of the last 4 years, ranging from $2 to $8 million in the red. The Tennessee Lookout reports the board also once misstated its cash on hand by $7 million. The state comptroller's office says these issues call into question the board's ability to continue managing the facilities without external support. Quality of care issues also raised concerns. Murfreesboro State Veterans Home has been accused of abuse and was downgraded by federal regulators to 1 star at the beginning of this year. The board in charge of the veterans' homes is disputing the audit's findings in a formal appeal. An invasive beetle that kills ash trees has turned up in Robertson County. State officials confirmed the presence of the emerald ash borer, making Robertson the 67th Tennessee county to detect the insect since 2010. Emerald ash borers have killed tens of millions of ash trees in the U.S. over the last 2 decades. Because they spread via untreated firewood, state officials are urging people to avoid moving ash materials to or from property unless they're heat treated. And if you have an ash tree, watch for signs like canopy thinning, bark splits, and woodpecker activity. An expansion at Radnor Lake State Park will bring new hiking trails to the natural preserve. The park has acquired an additional 9 acres near Franklin Road and Old Hickory Boulevard. According to park officials, the new trailhead will be the starting point for an up to 3.5-mile hike. It's a result of about 20 years of planning and $8 million in partnerships. Before development begins, officials will remove trash, invasive plants, and dilapidated housing from the area. Native grasses will then be restored. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. Just over a year ago, Davidson County voters approved a transit referendum that dedicates more tax dollars to bus service and other transportation projects. WPLN's Metro reporter, Cynthia Abrams, has been covering transportation since Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell announced his intention to overhaul the city's transit system. Cindy recently joined our news director, Tony Gonzalez, to recap the biggest changes over the past year.
Cindy, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, let's get started by going back in time a little bit to the referendum vote itself. Why was this such a big deal?
Yeah, so as probably everyone listening knows, Nashville's transit system is pretty far behind other cities. And a big reason for that is until this year, there was no dedicated transit funding. That's what the referendum established, a half-cent sales tax increase that goes directly to fund transit.
Okay, so that's what's going on kind of behind the scenes. But people do want to see their dollars in action. How quickly have tangible changes been getting underway?
So it's important to note that the transit proposal is a 15-year plan. So there are many elements that residents won't see until many years down the line due to required planning and funding. Plus, the city only started getting these new tax dollars in the spring. So all that to say, it wasn't a super rapid start to implementation.
Okay, but have there been any elements of the proposal getting underway?
Yes. One pretty big thing that has come to fruition in the last couple months is the Journey Pass program, which offers free bus fares to low-income residents.
Okay, this has been in the news a lot, and it was definitely something people were asking for.
Definitely. And that became very clear right away, especially because the rollout took place and was accelerated even during the federal government shutdown. So as things like SNAP food benefits were put on hold, leaving many struggling with overall cost of living, Metro ramped up enrollment for Journey Pass, particularly for SNAP recipients. During one of the sign-up events, I spoke with people who were enrolling and asked about the impact they felt the program would have. Here's Marisa Sherrill, a mom of 3, who told me that bus fares can really add up.
It will save a lot of money that I don't have to keep, that I don't have. I'm already struggling to pay my lights and rent, so it's taken out of what I already don't have. So
to date, more than 6,000 people have been enrolled.
Okay, so that's a fair program. What about sort of hard infrastructure? The Choose How You Move plan made a lot of promises about adding 86 miles of sidewalks, a dozen new transit centers, more updated traffic signals, and of course, building out bus rapid transit lines. Where does all of that stand?
So some of those things, the transit centers and the bus rapid transit system, are things that we have not really seen and are more likely to emerge during that 15-year time frame. Sidewalks and signals have been happening. This fall, O'Connell earmarked a good chunk of dollars, around $30 million, dedicated towards 17 sidewalk improvements, plus roughly the same amount for new smart signals at 115 intersections.
Okay, and part of those intersections, we just saw in the news this month, Lebanon Pike is about to get a couple dozen new signals.
Right. So the mayor's office is calling that a kickoff to modernizing signals. There's also been a queue jump added at the intersection of Murfreesboro Pike and Edgeoe Lake Drive. This lets buses bypass backlog traffic, giving the bus a better chance to run on time. I would also add that there are periodic service expansions. Every season, WeGo announces updates to different routes. The city has added long hours on several routes.
Okay, so all of that sounds like some progress on a few fronts. Are there any elements of the plan that the city has decided not to advance?
Yes, and that brings us to how the transit landscape in Nashville has had some substantial changes in the last year. So one thing that Metro has adjusted from their initial plan is bus rapid transit along Murfreesboro Pike, which was supposed to be one of the first corridors to get bus rapid transit treatment. But now, as the Nashville Business Journal reported, it's been moved down the priority list, with Nolensville and Gallatin Pikes both moving up.
Okay, and that change is because of some of the other things going on along Murfreesboro Pike, or really underneath it with the tunnel, right?
Exactly. So this is where I would say Nashville's transit is evolving, and some efforts are beyond the city's referendum and proposal. Earlier this year, Elon Musk's tunneling company, The Boring Company, unveiled plans to build a tunnel between downtown and the airport. In the tunnel, a fleet of Teslas will operate as a rideshare service. That's had an influence on Murfreesboro Pike, causing Metro to reevaluate it as a priority.
Okay, so it sounds like we'll have to wait and see how bus rapid transit develops in other corridors. All right, so last question. People have probably also been hearing about changes to the interstates, but that's a bit separate as well, right?
Right. So that's the state's Choice Lanes project. These are toll lanes that would help alleviate traffic. But the state is still in the information gathering stage of that project, pretty far off from actually coming to fruition.
Got it. Well, Cynthia, thanks for sorting out all the different transportation developments. Listeners, you can find more year-in-review analysis stories at WPLN.org. This is Nashville's local news and NPR station, 90.3 WPLN News.
We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. Thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. A little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener-supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one. And we'll catch back up tomorrow.
Funding for the Nashvillager podcast comes from the Hal Allen Clinic, specializing in minimally invasive robotic spine surgery and laser brain tumor surgery. For 40 years, the neurosurgeons of the Hal Allen Clinic have been national leaders in brain and spine surgery.